I am not the biggest fan of Pokemon. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the Johto games as a kid and had fun with Pokemon Violet when Gen 9 released, but I basically never touched anything in between aside from a few spin-offs like Mystery Dungeon and Pokken Tournament. However, I am a huge fan of Etrian Odyssey, getting into the series around 2018 and achieving 100% completion in the numbered games, including the HD remakes. What does this have to do with Pokemon? Well, both series have Mystery Dungeon games for starters, but there's another connection linking the two franchises together, and it's the reason you clicked on this video. Pokemon Odyssey is a Fire Red ROM hack released on June 13th, 2025, which melds the philosophies of both franchises into one experience. Sprinkle in some herbs and spices from Made in Abyss, and you get a fan game with a unique feel and a solid following. Now, I first heard about it back in 2024 while it was still in development. I thought, cool, I'll wait for the full release. The year came and went, and I'd all but forgotten about Pokemon Odyssey until one day this video popped up into my recommended. I gotta get my hands on this. What's an IV? So I've already seen a few folks play this ROM hack on YouTube, folks definitely more interested in Pokemon than I am. I can't approach this fan game the way those on the Pokemon side of things can. However, if you'll permit me, I'll tell you all about how much of a love letter Pokemon Odyssey is from an Etrian fan's perspective. And with Pokemon Odyssey 2 in active development, I felt a video like this needed to be made eventually, whether by myself or another passionate player. This video aims to provide a primer on Etrian Odyssey and show what Pokemon Odyssey borrows, as well as what it does to set itself apart one section at a time, and is largely intended for people who've completed Pokemon Odyssey's true ending. This is not a plot summary, but will reference things that happen, including some story and gameplay spoilers. Consider this a companion piece to the content, rather than a way to experience it vicariously. If you want to try Pokemon Odyssey for yourself, I'll leave a link to the Poke Community post in the description, and you can find your way from there. As for Etrian Odyssey, the original trilogy can be found either on Nintendo DS or in HD on Steam or Switch, while the other games are currently left to rot in 3DS hell. My recommendation, especially if you're fresh off Pokemon Odyssey, is to try Etrian Odyssey 3 HD. It has enough elements that'll get you doing that Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme like I did for the ROM hack. Also, I'm not affiliated with the developer team, I'm just a fan with a lot to say who needed an outlet to say it. Alright, with that out of the way, let's dive in. Unless you're still sleeping in a crib, you know what Pokemon is. But this might be the first time you've heard of Etrian Odyssey unless you remember a specific Nintendo Direct, or that one Pro ZD skit.
If we all hit the bad guys really hard and really fast, everything will be okay.
Maybe a healer would be...
Okay, thanks, Guildmaster, bye!
Yeah, but wait, who's going in the back row? I'll forget it.
Etrian Odyssey is a dungeon crawler RPG developed for the Nintendo DS, 3DS, Switch, and PC by Atlus. Yes, that Atlus. It is a gameplay-driven experience focused on exploration, party building, and engaging combat. Let's focus on each separately. In every entry, there exists the Yggdrasil Labyrinth, a gargantuan tree whose depths delve deep into the earth or rise high above the clouds. It varies from game to game. One thing is certain, it is no natural plant. Herbs and minerals which don't exist anywhere else can be found within, and these rare goods draw all sorts of people to the exotic location. Doctors researching medicine, architects in need of sturdy materials, and of course, explorers seeking fortune and glory. In time, a boomtown is established, its economical health centered on exporting these finds and the products made from them. Both Etrian Odyssey and Pokemon Odyssey put you in the shoes of explorers. Your job is to extract resources from the labyrinth for profit, complete missions and side jobs from people in need, and discover what secrets are hidden further within. In Etrian Odyssey specifically, everything you gather can be sold to the local shop, which in turn unlocks new equipment, items, etc. For instance, selling a total of 15 tiny tooths in Etrian Odyssey 3 unlocks the Deathly Belt, an accessory which increases critical hit chance. There are also conditional drops where certain actions can give special rewards, such as defeating an enemy with ice damage. It's an awesome system that I don't see very often. The closest I can think of is the Bazaar from Final Fantasy XII, but even then that's not quite right, though I digress. Pokemon Odyssey does this to an extent. You can hand materials to this lady to upgrade the shop for better healing items, Pokeballs, and so on. You can gather flower petals to bring to this old guy and craft some specialty Pokeballs. And in Etrian, you can give him materials to Silva to get the 3 choice-held items. I wish defeating Pokemon gave drops just like EO, but if that happened, then the Slowpoke tail market would be in full swing again. So I can see why they chose not to make you organ harvest your favorite little beans. Aside from enemies, there are designated points to gather raw materials. In EO, these are take, mine, and chop points, and in Pokemon Odyssey, there are distinct plants and little gem formations. Both games limit how much you can gather in one sitting, in EO through skill points and the day-night system, and in PO the stamina system, which is replenished by visiting any Pokécenter or equivalent. Medkits don't count, as I've come to learn. To search for these resources, you are free to explore the region with a few small restrictions. At the end of each region, called a stratum, is a boss you must overcome in order to explore deeper. In Etrian Odyssey, these are large, dangerous beasts like Narmer, whereas in Pokemon Odyssey they are captains. You might think of them as gym leaders without a gym. Defeating them proves you are capable of surviving the next stratum and are free to move on, while also getting a boost to your Pokemon's level cap. Oh right, the ROM hack instates a level cap on certain difficulties to keep things suitably challenging. So how much can you explore? In Etrian Odyssey, it's mostly about pushing how far you can get into a stratum before heading back to retreat, regroup, recover, and resupply. The same goes for PO as well, and in both cases progress can come in the form of creating shortcuts. Also, in EO3 and 4, there are some side explorations you can do for EXP and resources. Pokemon Odyssey borrows from both games the aesthetic of the former and the mechanics of the latter to have sea exploration. Aside from delving into the Labyrinth, you can sail to other islands forming the Telriga region. Out there you can find towns, quests, items, and most importantly, more Pokemon. Surprisingly, this opens up after you clear your first battle with Bandit Brody in the abandoned lab, meaning you can explore all of Telriga's surface before ever setting foot in the labyrinth, provided you can handle battles well above your level. I say it's surprising because this side content is at least a quarter of the entire game handed to you to check out whenever you feel like it. The ROM hack also borrows mechanics to encourage backtracking, for better and for worse. Better, because it helps give you reasons to revisit old areas for new items. For worse, because, like Etrian Odyssey often does, this only goes until around the 4th stratum, or halfway in. I'm mostly talking about the Magnavis, which lets you push boulders, and the Item Finder, when I'm talking about reasons to backtrack. Both the fan game and EO help alleviate this by having quests bring you to old locations to, for example, clear out a high-level enemy before it terrorizes the new blood. I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking about Metroidvanias when these are RPGs, but I feel like key items enabling backtracking should continue to be useful until around the 2/3 mark. That's just me nitpicking though. Since we're on the topic of strata, let me just rapid fire off where the 8 strata in Pokemon Odyssey come from. Emerald Grove is from Pokemon Odyssey 1, the Desert of Golgonda is inspired by the Sandy Barrens, also in EO1, the Magmatic Caves are probably based on the Molten Caves in EO3, Azure Rainforest is the 3rd stratum of EO1, and man do I love its aesthetic. The Abyssal Shrine comes from EO3. Frozen Grounds are the 3rd stratum of Etrian Odyssey 2, the beautiful Porcelain Forest is in EO3. And finally, the Cyclopean Haunt is the final stratum of Etrian Odyssey 3. So all in all, 3 from EO1, 1 from EO2, and 4 from EO3. Some islands in Telriga also share names with strata, such as the Auburn Thicket. So who visits all these locations? In mainline Etrian Odyssey, you create a guild of characters to explore the Yggdrasil Labyrinth with. These characters are blank slates you choose the class, skills, and appearance of to tailor your experience towards your playstyle. However, the Untold games, pseudo-remakes of Etrian Odyssey 1 and 2, provide a story mode option where you can follow a group of preset characters with their own personalities and backstories. Pokemon Odyssey opts for the latter's version of storytelling. Meet Nyx, an novice explorer and sister of Amy, a veteran who has ventured further than most people. Nyx joins the Explorers Guild at the same time as Ethan, a stubborn boy with a strange medallion, and Olympia, a robot. They're not alone, however, because while Etrian Odyssey's method of party building stems from what classes you bring into the labyrinth, Pokemon Odyssey's method is what Pokemon comprise your team of 6. To that end, Pokemon Odyssey offers many quality of life features to smooth out your team building process. All Pokemon have the same IVs when caught, you can manually assign their EVs for a fee, there are nature and ability changers, the Move Tutor, Name Rater, and Evolution Guide are all in the same building, and you get a key item early on that tells you which Pokemon are available in your current area. It's awesome, especially for an out-of-the-loop Pokemon fan like me. As for individual Pokemon, this ROM hack offers generations 1 through 3 and the accompanying evolutions from later gens, minus a few as I later came to realize, notably some legendaries and Sylveon, probably because Fairy type isn't implemented, but it's supposed to be in Pokemon Odyssey too. Most if not all featured Pokemon have their base stats tweaked and some got type changes like Togekiss becoming normal flying, which means even your starters of Plusle and Minun have roles they can fulfill from start to finish if you're so inclined. One of the biggest draws for me are the regional Pokemon exclusive to this ROM hack called Etrian variants. These Pokemon, like regional variants in the mainline series, are alternate forms of existing Pokemon. The only fake mon of note are the new Aether-type Eevee evolution of Yggdrasil, and the cut evolution of Raichu, Gorochu. I'll go into detail for each variant much later into the video, partially using the documentation provided by the dev team and my own knowledge of the original series. Links for said Google Docs in the Poke community post in the description. For now, just know that I was excited every time I saw one in game and understood the reference. It's amazing how well the sprite artists managed to blend two games' differing art styles into one cohesive vision. Where there is something valuable, there is something to protect it. Monstrous animals call the Yggdrasil Labyrinth their home, and they do not appreciate you treading into their territory. Prepare yourself accordingly, explorer, for if you fall short, you may not escape with your life. Well, I would be saying that if we didn't scurry off and drop a little pocket change whenever we lose a battle. I don't need to tell you that Pokemon's combat is engaging. I mean, there's a whole competitive scene for it. While Etrian Odyssey does not have PvP, it is still fun to help your team of explorers survive everything the Labyrinth throws at them. That said, Pokemon's main gameplay is not very challenging without player-imposed restrictions, while Etrian Odyssey is a series known for its difficulty. Thankfully, newer entries and remasters offer difficulty options to let newcomers enjoy the game without needing to master it. The same goes for Pokemon Odyssey, which provides these options from the start and can be changed anytime you are at Nyx's house. To keep in the spirit of smart party building and engaging combat, Pokemon Odyssey opts for all fights to be double battles, except wild Pokemon. This allows for team synergy to be a key factor, like letting tanky Pokemon actually tank while the glass cannons annihilate the opponent. There are a few changes to note with combat, however. New moves and abilities have been added, and as I said in the party building segment, most Pokemon have been tweaked in some way to be more viable. There is also Ether, a new type that is super effective to nothing, is resisted by poison, dark, and itself, is weak to poison and dark, and resists fire, ground, water, flying, and itself. Additional changes include poison being super effective against water, and ice type now resisting dark and psychic. Something I should also note is how both parent franchises care about status effects and buffs actually mattering in combat, and Pokemon Odyssey is no exception. However, there is one major deviation. You cannot use items in battle aside from held items. I kind of get it though. In normal Pokemon, it makes battles quite cheesy with their high priority, and it can't be balanced to have the user's speed factor into when the item's consumed like in Etrian Odyssey. Helping to keep exploration and combat engaging are the FOEs, or Field-On Enemies. These enemies wander the labyrinth and possess the strength of mini-bosses, an obstacle to avoid and eventually a challenge to overcome. Chances are that even if you've never heard of or touched EO before today, you've seen these adorable fuzzy orbs before. There are many colors of FOE in the original trilogy representing different properties, but Pokemon Odyssey uses the iconic orange one to represent wandering Pokemon. Most of them are just regular Pokemon that are higher level and all stats are boosted by one stage, but every now and then you'll find something unique. After besting a Stratum's captain, you can actually capture these FOEs for yourself, though there isn't a special benefit compared to capturing the normal version. Before moving on to the next section, I'd like to briefly cover one last topic, that of a secret stratum that is only unlocked when you beat the final boss. Every Etrian Odyssey has this, and exploring them to completion will test your knowledge of the game and push your team to its limits. At the bottom will be the toughest challenge the game has to offer. Pokemon Odyssey has this too, albeit it's a smaller zone with some mini-bosses and a post-game super boss. We'll come back to them when it's time to talk about characters, but for now let's move on. Most Etrian Odyssey games tell their stories in a minimalist fashion, informing you of current events with a pinch of world building before setting you loose again. Don't let anyone tell you they don't have a plot. They're not bad or non-existent, they're brief. In turn, I've heard some players immerse themselves via role-playing their characters, imagining a kind of single-player D&D to get more out of it. The Untold games in Pokemon Odyssey are exceptions through having expanded storylines and pre-made characters. I mostly want to focus on shared elements over the actual plots, but because of what some elements contain, consider this your last spoiler warning for the remainder of the video. Starting off, you are not the first band of explorers to venture into the Yggdrasil Labyrinth, and chances are you won't be the last. In Etrian Odyssey, you can run into other NPC guilds in your travels, or they may post requests in the local bar. It's more apparent in Pokemon Odyssey, where trainers all over Talriga are wanting to talk or battle. You, aka Nyx, are a newbie retreading ground the pioneers have already covered. However, there is often a point where normal explorers cannot go further. In Etrian Odyssey 3, this is the end of the second stratum. In Pokemon Odyssey, it's deep down in the 8th. If you and your party can surpass that obstacle, then you become the pioneers others aspire to. Don't go losing your head now. Death happens all too often in the depths. You may be a bright-eyed youth with a map in hand and a sword at your waist, but this is the Yggdrasil Labyrinth. To it, you are prey. From what I've seen, Pokemon tends to infer death rather than outright state it. But in Etrian Odyssey and Made in Abyss, death is a common occurrence. See? Told you I could fit that enemy in here somewhere. You may find a request to retrieve a fallen guild's weapons, or investigate spirit sightings. Sometimes, you may find the aftermath of an ill-fated encounter. As soon as you step through, the hideous stench triggers your gag reflex. The ground is stained crimson with blood, and corpses are stacked on the field. The blood-curdling sight reminds you of the mission you accepted at the Duke's Palace. You agreed then to find the soldiers who never returned from their posts in the forest. The gruesome open grave before you may be the final resting place of those very soldiers. A sudden roar from the east of the room startles you. You know now what caused this slaughter. You suppose you are obliged to check the area for survivors, though your hopes are dim. The monster to the east remains still. You see a side path leading into the forest. If you're to check the side path, you must defeat the monster or find another way. Your options are open. You only wish you understood just what they were. One thing is certain. This is a fearful monster, and your victory is by no means certain. Pokemon Odyssey tones this down to an extent. There's a quest in the third stratum where you go to find a boy, but are moments too late as a group of FOEs surround and kill him. In the fifth stratum and later, you will frequently encounter trainers who've mutated into monsters and are being controlled by an outside force. They crumble into dust upon defeat, leaving no ambiguity that these people have died. I kind of think this ties into Made in Abyss as well, since in that series there's a danger of death or mutation if you try to ascend too quickly. but this might be a stretch. There is a slight ludonarrative dissonance in that Nyx can't be killed except for the post-game final battle where failure triggers the bad ending, but not every game needs a game over condition, least of all Pokemon. Sometimes the reason people die isn't because of the labyrinth's dangers. Sometimes there are other inhabitants. These sapient civilizations may attempt to halt further exploration for one reason or another. This was true of the forest folk, who wanted the human town of Etrian to stop violating the ancient pact. This was true of the Deep City, who wanted as few humans as possible to know the truth of the depths, as their enemy fed on emotions. This is especially true of the Deep Ones, who wished to free their god from its prison. The Deep Ones and their leader, the Progenitor, are lifted wholesale from Pokemon Odyssey 3 and go under a new name, the Abyssals. Individuals such as Kozuki are original characters, however, as most Deep Ones are regular enemies or FOEs. While their goals may be the same, Pokemon Odyssey does more to engender sympathy for the alien race by creating characters with names, faces, and families. There's even a royal bloodline now. They aren't just a bunch of freaky fish guys, and I think that benefits the kind of story Pokemon Odyssey is trying to tell. Keep the Progenitor in mind, I'll get back to them later. As for the Yggdrasil, I don't have much to say. They're an original concept for the ROM hack loosely inspired by the Deep City and designed after a character I'll get into in the later sections. Regardless, this is a faction diametrically opposed to the Deep Ones, as the Yggdrasil wish to defeat or destroy the Abyssal God imprisoned within the Labyrinth. Similar to their Deep City counterparts, they created the Yggdroids as weapons to combat the encroaching threat. This, coincidentally enough, brings me to the Porcelain Offering. In Pokemon Odyssey 3, when the Yggdrasil traps the Abyssal God below the ocean, fragments of crystallized mana fall to the earth. One fragment in particular is the Porcelain Offering, and eventually it's splintered into the Starry Shard and Sky Bowl. In the true ending of Pokemon Odyssey 3, you give these items to the Eldest One, who reassembles it and tells you what to do with it. So, you go to the 5th stratum where the final boss would normally be, and instead use the gift to restore humanity to both the Android Prince of the Deep City and Deep One Princess of Armor Road. In removing the Deep One's influence from the Princess, you inadvertently restore power to the Eldest One, and so they break free of their prison and resume role of Progenitor, mother and father of all Deep Ones. So to fix your mistake, you go and kill them, and then learn of their god slumbering deep in the 6th stratum. Pokemon Odyssey does its own thing with the Porcelain Offering, taking a line or two from the original Progenitor's dialogue and turning it into a core theme of the plot. What if humans and Deep Ones could coexist? And the Yggdrasil too, since, well, they're here now. The Porcelain Offering is still crystallized mana, but now it is effectively capable of performing miracles and is vital if Nyx's party is going to defeat the Abyssal God. In this story, the item is a myth sought after by both races but never attained, as written in the steels dotting the 3rd stratum. In truth, it is the coalescence of two forms of mana, Abyssal and Yggdra. To facilitate it, one must bring together the Abyssal Shard, a powerful relic which feeds off life energy, and the Yggdra Medallion, which draws from Yggdrasil to supply life energy. Yet merely possessing these artifacts is not enough. Forging the Porcelain Offering requires someone with mastery over both forms of magic. A freaky fish tree, if you will. If all prerequisites are met, even a cosmic entity like the Abyssal God may be brought to heel. If I went over every character, we'd be here a while, so I'm mostly going to cover direct references to Pokemon Odyssey and what little I know of Made in Abyss. Just know that Kit's design is inspired by the Yu-Gi-Oh monster of the same name, and some characters are cameos from other ROM hacks. Also, since this is the characters section and I won't be mentioning them otherwise, I think Ethan is the best written character of the main cast, and my favorite captain is Matilda. Plus Brody is awesome. Okay, meat and potatoes part, let's go. I believe our heroine Nyx is partially inspired by Rico from Made in Abyss. Nyx follows in her sister's footsteps to become an explorer, and when Amy goes into the labyrinth and doesn't return, Nyx is motivated to find out what happened and reunite with her. Likewise, Rico is following in her mother's footsteps, journeying into the abyss in hopes of finding her. Also, both are characters who are born in the depths and raised on the surface. These are surface level observations, I know, but that's what I gathered since Nyx is otherwise an original character. Over at Aqua Resort, we have Jenetta and Napier. Jenetta is an innkeeper from Eoris, the setting of Etrian Odyssey 5, who was whisked away to Talriga under mysterious circumstances. Napier is a materialistic merchant from Armor Road in EO3, who was similarly transported to Talriga. Both have grown accustomed to their new environs, however, and seem none the worse for wear. For Nyx, these two are part of a questline to retrieve stolen treasures and expand Napier's specialty shop. I wonder how Napier's sister is doing. She's been running a store in the Deep City for quite a while now, and Napier's disappearance would no doubt affect her to some degree. Speaking of Armor Road, the Yggdrasil that traps the Abyssal God is actually a sentient being. However, it does not manifest an avatar to speak with anyone like in Pokemon Odyssey. In fact, it pretty much only communicates with the Deep City's leader. My theory is that Yggdrasil and P.O., and the Yggdra's design as a whole, took inspiration from Armor Road's tree as well as the character Arkin, who distantly watches Eoris and hopes the evil within that labyrinth will one day be slain. Moving down to the 7th stratum, Captain Gutrune is quite dissimilar to her Armor Road counterpart. In Etrian Odyssey, she is a princess who begged the Progenitor to prolong her life so that she might reunite with her brother, becoming part Deep One in the process. Captain Gutrune is a scientist studying Talriga's mana for medicinal benefits, and she also helps train Ethan in his healing arts. However, Princess Gutrune shares a particular quality with Nyx in that both can consume amaranthos flowers, which are toxic to anyone not of the Abyssal God's brood. Alright, that's about it for the shorter paragraphs. I have 4 more characters I want to go over, starting with Visil. Despite leading the Explorers Guild in Pokemon Odyssey and the first Etrian Odyssey, Visil's aspirations differ quite dramatically. EO1's Visil is also the governor of Etria, whose economy thrives on explorers plundering the labyrinth. However, he can't let them delve so deep that there are no secrets left to uncover, so he deploys a handpicked duo to assassinate anyone who reaches the 5th stratum. Visil himself is also immortal, for he is a scientist who participated in the Yggdrasil project ages ago in order to contain a rampant pollution which strangled the planet. This pollution eventually manifested as a creature deep within the giant tree's roots, and in time these roots would be stained red with fallen adventurers. Given the circumstances, Visil is somewhat torn. He wishes that evil to be destroyed, but success means turn Etria into a ghost town once explorers stop flooding in. He also tells you to massacre the indigenous forest folk in an attempt to get you killed, so he's still a pretty bad guy no matter which way you slice it. Visil in Pokemon Odyssey is a villain with no qualms about his actions. Brother to the Abyssal King and Nyx's uncle, Visil infiltrated the world of humans and helped start the Explorers Guild in order to clear a safe path back to his home in the 8th stratum. Doing so meant unsealing the temple his sleeping kin resided in, and allowed his plans to empower the Abyssal God to commence. He kidnaps, brainwashes, manipulates, and sacrifices, all so that his deity may taste freedom at last. And so, his machinations culminate in the resurrection of the Progenitor, bound to the body that once belonged to Amy. In both versions, the Progenitor is the highest-ranking servant of the Abyssal God and the final boss of the respective games. They challenge their opponent to prove that they possess the strength to achieve their ambitions, for the Progenitor will not stand idly while their god remains imprisoned. Yet both once wondered if there could be a world where the different races coexisted, and have since quashed such ideas as naive. The only difference, which stems from a lack of screen time, is that Etrian Odyssey's Progenitor is proven to be more cunning, commanding the Deep Ones and manipulating Armor Road's princess from their prison in the 3rd stratum. Regardless, both progenitors are laid low, and in defeat admit their enemies may have had the capacity to achieve what they could not, then tell them the Abyssal God will be humanity's final trial. The Abyssal God's awakening is presaged by the arrival of 3 dragons in Pokemon Odyssey, represented by Gouging Fire, Raging Bolt, and Walking Wake. The elemental dragons are a staple of Etrian Odyssey, appearing as super bosses in every entry who will massacre your party if you don't know what you're doing, though their roles differ from game to game. In Etrian Odyssey 3, they are presented by the Elder Dragon as challenges for humanity to overcome, for if they cannot defeat the trio, they stand no chance against the Abyssal God. In Pokemon Odyssey, you either catch them or defeat them, just like every other legendary. I hope if they make a return in the sequel that they at least have an Etrian variant to complete the reference. I will say though, that I like the idea of the 3 Bells side quest involving heroes using the 3 legendary beasts to win a war. It makes them and their Paradox counterparts fit nicely within the story of Pokemon Odyssey rather than feel like an arbitrary addition. Alright, I've generally spoken positively so far, but my feelings over this next topic is something I can't keep to myself. Why does the Abyssal God talk? Like, at all? This is supposed to be a Cthulhu-inspired deity that destroys worlds for breakfast. It's above humanity. That is why its minions do all the dirty work. We are but ants trying to comprehend something so much larger than us that even a nanosecond of understanding would drive us to insanity. It doesn't talk in Etrian Odyssey. It doesn't need to. Not even when we're about to fight it. So I ask again, why does the Abyssal God speak like an edgelord trying to sound cool and intimidating? I think even Cassian would find them cringe. In my eyes, this is the only true weak point of Pokemon Odyssey. Everything else is fantastic, including how well written the majority of characters are, so I don't intend any malice when I criticize the big bad. I just think it could have been handled better. Okay, that's out of the way. Let's cap this off with one of the biggest highlights of Pokemon Odyssey, and one of the greatest contrasts from her inspiration, Olympia. Both Olympias are part of a series of Yggdroids designed to combat and destroy Deep Ones and Abyssals. Both serve a prince, and though they have their own minds, are beholden to the orders of their respective lieges. That is pretty much where the similarities end, so let's elaborate on the differences one character at a time, and effectively recap both plots since their appearances are so prevalent. The Olympia of Etrian Odyssey 3 initially appears as an explorer wearing a disguise to mingle with other humans. She guides them to points of interest and, if they get deep enough into the second stratum, into deadly traps. Her go-to location is a nest of FOE sea creatures from which adventurers don't return. Until you do, that is. Then she goes into hiding and the soldiers of Armor Road pursue her to make her answer for her crimes. As it turns out, Olympia's led explorers to their deaths for decades, actively hindering all efforts to delve deeper. Just as she's about to finish the party herself, she is stopped by Kitos, who instead challenges the group to a battle on the 8th floor. When they succeed, the party discovers the Deep City and are promptly escorted out by Olympia at the behest of its leader, and asked to keep the place a secret. Armor Road's leaders find out anyway and send the party back with gifts as a form of peace accord, and from there she brings the group to the Eldest One's prison to give a better grasp of the situation at hand. The Deep City wanted as few humans as possible to know of the Deep Ones, for the Abyssal God feeds off of negative emotions, hence their efforts to stall exploration. With the path opened, however, the two cities decide to briefly cooperate until the party finds themselves at a crossroads. They can side with Armor Road to push deeper into the labyrinth, or they can side with the Deep City to stall Armor Road and wage war with the Deep Ones. If you side with Armor Road, Olympia truly becomes your enemy, going so far as to summon monsters to stop your advance. She's even the final boss of that route right next to her liege. Whichever ending you'll get, she'll come back for the post-game. In 2 scenarios, she'll replace her king as the NPC that grants subclasses to party members, and in the Deep City ending she doesn't have much presence. In all cases, her story comes to an end as you prepare to dive into the final stratum and face the Abyssal God. The Olympia of Pokemon Odyssey is also an explorer, but she never hides the fact that she's a robot. Her goals are largely Ethan's goals, which are to get stronger and defeat the Abyssal Menace once and for all, as well as help Nyx since they're friends of Amy. She may be a machine, but she has a lot of sass, and her personality only grows as the story goes on. Her emotional journey is a large part of her character arc, going from purely calculating to as human as anyone else, only without a human body. In fact, she is one of the more inspiring members of the group, keeping spirits high when everyone's feeling low from the gravity of their situation. Heck, she even convinces a lifelong bandit to change his ways. Honestly, Olympia is closer to Reg from Made in Abyss than her original counterparts. Both have dedicated assault modes, both are pretty human in personality, and both are solid companions to have when journeying into dangerous territory. With that said, I do have one gripe about her, and it all stems from a single line. She's designed to detect and kill abyssals. If that's true, then she does a pretty poor job of detecting them. That, or the ones she fails to detect, are hiding it really well. We can excuse Nyx as her knowing and just not saying anything. How the heck did she not detect Visil on sight? Is it a royal blood thing? Do her sensors fail to comprehend abyssal energy signatures that are higher than she was designed to find? Good job, Silva, you really knocked that one out of the park. Anyway, at the start of the post-game, Olympia learns more about the Porcelain Offering and informs the gang. Once they learn how to manifest it, they confront the Abyssal God to put an end to the war, with Nyx distracting the enemy while Kids performs the ritual. Olympia absorbs the Porcelain Offering and destroys every trace of the Abyssal God, but all that energy took its toll and Olympia ceases to function, making the victory bittersweet. That's where the story ends in the normal route, but luckily I did all the side quests. In the true ending, Olympia gained a soul from having been in contact with the Porcelain Offering, and it just so happens that there's enough left that she can wish for anything. So what does she wish for? To become human and experience all the things she couldn't as a war machine, of course. And everyone lived happily ever after, except the ones who are dead. There are over 100 Etrian variants in Pokemon Odyssey, so I figured they needed a dedicated section to give them their proper respect. I originally wasn't gonna do this and simply leave it at the developer Google Docs showing the references, but I've since changed my mind. If this video is meant to be a companion piece, I might as well cover the critters that drew me into the ROM hack in the first place. I'm going in normal National Pokedex order, not Talrigadex or the Google Docs order, so keep that in mind. Also, shinies can range from referencing palette swaps of enemies and classes to being original as far as I can tell, so I'm gonna skip them too. Lastly, since the Battle Bond Pokemon and Yggdrasil are based on characters in Pokemon Odyssey, there's not really a reason to go into origins, cause they're right there. To start us off, Rattata and Rattricate are based on tree rats, which are fairly common low-level encounters. There isn't much to say about them aside from standing imposingly when they make their appearance late in Etrian Odyssey 3 because they don't do much aside from bite and drop teeth or hides. Spearow and Fearow is based on Iwa Oro Penelope, the Stratum boss of the Sandy Barrens and guardian to the Forest Folk. It is a Volt-aspected bird that refuses to die unless you defeat the other FOEs on its floor, which consist of elite warriors that very much want you dead. If you manage to best this avian being, the Forest Folk's morale is broken and you can move deeper into Etria's Labyrinth. Ekans and Arbok are inspired by the Jormungandr, mythical Norse serpent and true final boss of Etrian Odyssey Nexus. This is one of the few bosses that can be challenged in different states, those being weakened or at full strength. It was imprisoned by the Abyssal Princess, no relation, to stop it from destroying the world. As a personal aside, this jerk is the only reason I didn't finish Nexus on heroic difficulty, and as long as that game was, I was too exhausted to care anymore and slaughter them on Picnic so I could move on. Sandshrew and Sandslash, by contrast, take their variant forms from Rollers, another common enemy in many of the games. They are typically resistant to physical attacks but crumple to elemental damage. In the first game, they also battle alongside the second Stratum boss, providing healing, whereas in EO4 they can be picked up and thrown by angry baboons, which appear on the same floors. Our first FOE-based variant is the Divine Judge, represented by Vulpix and Ninetales. Another lightning-oriented enemy, Divine Judges patrol the Porcelain Forest, changing their path depending on if it's day or night. This typically means they are guarding treasures or shorter roads compared to the alternative, but in at least one case they are patrolling the sole path to progress depending on what time of day you get there. Now for the first class-based Etrian variant. Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff represent the Farmer from EO3 and Nexus. These are not classes suited for combat. Rather, farmers are kitted with utility skills for exploration, such as improved gathering techniques, better healing from campsites, and reduced encounter rate. They are best served in a secondary party, often dedicated to gathering as many materials as their 60-slot inventory can fit to sell for a pretty intel. Machop, Machoke, and Machamp embody the Pugilist from EO5 and Nexus. These hand-to-hand brawlers can specialize in binding their enemies, restricting the kinds of moves they can execute. Likewise, Pugilists can specialize in becoming stronger the more damage they and their party become, often further hurting themselves from the sheer power behind their attacks. Etrian, Ponyta, and Rapidash are based on the Sleipnir from EO2 and Norse mythology. Unfortunately, these are pretty run-of-the-mill horse enemies with a really cool design. They have a palette swap in the form of the Nightmare, which is also a simple enemy that can inflict the Fear status. Technically speaking, Etrian Farfetch'd has two inspirations, the first being the Fencer class from EO5. Borrowing the Chaser skills from its predecessors, the Fencer can focus on following up on their allies' attacks or becoming a solid dodge tank. The second inspiration is their nickname, Conrad. EO5 was a 3DS entry, meaning it had some Street Pass functionality where players could share each other's guild cards. On occasion, you would encounter other players' guilds while exploring the labyrinth and they'd give you something. Conrad of the Freeblades Guild was the default party member for those instances where there was no guild to pull from, meaning if you never used Street Pass, then this was the only guy you'd ever meet. The Deadly Scissor Crab is where Etrian Krabby and Kingler get their purple shells and red-stained claws. These crabs come in many forms, including regular enemy and FOE. The main problem as an enemy is their sturdiness against physical attacks, but as FOEs, they're ambush predators hiding in the waters of the Azure Rainforest or within the frozen grounds, only coming out when the party is in the middle of a battle. Take too long and they'll join in on the carnage, using their skills to try and inflict instant death. Execute and specifically Executor are based on the cannon poem from Etrian Odyssey Untold and Nexus. They shoot coconuts. That's kinda funny. The wildlings of Etrian Odyssey 3 make an appearance as Cubone and Marowak. These were among the first summoner classes calling animals who would fill up a normally empty 6th slot in the party and inflict various elements on the enemy. For example, the Venomfly would try to spread poison while the Mole would bind legs. After summoning their companion, wildlings served little role themselves. They could debuff the enemy or strike them with their spears, but I usually made them the designated item user. Etrian Chansey and Blissey wear the clothes of the medic, one of the most reoccurring classes in EO, having made appearances in 1, 2, 4, and Nexus. They are rather straightforward healers, but depending on the game they can have some strange quirks. In EO1, for instance, their skill Immunize reduces all damage taken, making them one of the best classes to take alongside Protector for mitigating damage to such a degree that most combat is either significantly more manageable or trivialized. In EO2 Untold, their attack skills can reach ludicrous damage with the right setup. Tangela and Tangrowth are based on the Abyssal God from EO3. Alright, since I didn't do much but complain during their segment in the characters section, I'll do them proper justice here. The Abyssal God is the post-game final boss and true villain of Etrian Odyssey 3, and a right pain to defeat. They have two phases. In the first, you're fighting against their base, the current HP of which is determined by how many tentacles you've slain on the 25th floor. They're not too rough at the stage, but will try to resurrect tentacles and restore health, so you want to beat them as soon as possible. Once you do so, reality begins to shift as the Abyssal God starts taking you seriously. Here is where it will switch between two modes. A defensive mode that tries to counterattack whenever you strike it, and trust me when I say they will treat by reading your inputs to know what you're doing, and an offensive mode where you are both in a life or death struggle. If you take more than 40 turns to win, then it will go berserk and no longer follow a set pattern. This fight is a true test of skill, and victory rewards you with the material to craft the best katana in the game, as well as the satisfaction that you just saved the world. They can also be cheesed with a specific two-person composition, which is really funny. Jinx and their pre-evolution Smoochum take the role of one of the Abyssal God's subordinates, the FOE Deep Prelate. These elementalist mages only appear on one floor, but they guard it zealously. Wandering the same floor are deep Koistrels, which are burly melee specialists. Together they can perform a combo attack that can wipe out your party. Elekid, Electabuzz, and Electivire are all based on the protagonist from EO2U, the titular Fafnir Knight. One of the few silent protagonists to actually have a personality, he and his best friend Flavio are charged with defending Princess Ariana while she conducts a ritual deep in Ganungagap, where they eventually encounter explorers Bertrand and Chloe. Fafnir has the ability to transform and unleash incredible elemental attacks, and the absolute best ability anyone can have no matter what series. He plays his own boss music every time he transforms. Just be ready to hear it a lot. Buccaneers are the flavor of class Magby, Magbar, and Magmortar took on. These swashbuckling explorers lean heavily on chaser skills, either firing elemental bullets with their pistols or skillful strikes with their rapiers. They're also capable of blinding or binding an enemy's head, providing some utility. Omanite and Omastar have taken in the corruption of their inspiration, the Yggdrasil core from EO1, also known as Primeval. Having successfully fulfilled its role of purifying the world, the core became a dense confluence of pollution and transformed into the hideous creature it is now. As the final post-game boss of EO1, it fought the party following a strict script filled with one-hit KO moves and strong party-wide elemental attacks, along with some space for variation. Only if you countered the script with your own abilities could you survive, making it more of a puzzle to solve via note-taking and trial and error than a boss. Or you could just refer to a guide, since it was rough to get one turn further only to be blindsided. Kabuto and Kabutops embody a deadly creature that goes by many names, but here I'll refer to it as the Stalker. Appearing in most Etrian Odyssey games, this FOE is often located in places where adventurers are much too weak to survive a battle with them. Coupled with their signature instant death moves such as Amputate, this typically makes them the first true sign that the Labyrinth's dangers are not always obstacles to overcome, but serious threats to avoid. Likewise, Aerodactyl has taken on the form of the Wyvern. This late-game boss is first encountered in EO1 on the 8th floor, where avoiding it is a necessity in order to progress deeper into the stratum. However, it isn't as strong as some monsters lurking deeper within the labyrinth, as often its conditional drop requires defeating it within a set turn limit. Moving on to the Johto Pokédex, Etrian Meganium is based on the Greedy Lizard. This is an early game FOE from EO3 and as such, isn't too crazy to handle for an experienced party. For new players, however, its poison might be a death sentence. Etrian Feraligator, on the other hand, is based on the often lethal Dinogator. Sometimes referred to as the Mugdile or the Abyssal Death, this purple reptile is a fearsome FOE appearing in all EO games but 5. They are sometimes mid-game enemies, and in those cases they aren't the worst. But in EO2, they're an absolute nightmare to encounter on the 30th and final floor. They're fast, they try to bind the entire party by frolicking, and their bite strikes up to 8 times for nasty damage across your team. Worse, they can ambush you at any door or gathering point on that floor, getting the first hit in and most likely winning before you even register what happened. And just to rub it in, sometimes you can fight not one, but 2 at the same time. Your best chance is to forego armor entirely and stack accessories that reduce cut-based damage, then aim to bind its head or put it to sleep. If you're feeling confident, you could bind it completely and insta-kill it with the Dark Hunter's skills. That's if you meet the prerequisite of getting it down to half HP in the first place, of course. A different enemy with many names is the Hypnosis Owl, played by the roles of Hoot Hoot and Noctowl. They're a common enemy that, depending on the game, either strikes with lightning or tries to put the party to sleep. Their palette swap, the Maya Owl, tries to confuse the party instead. Going back to classes, Natu and Xatu are based on the Zodiac from 3 and Nexus. They're a standard elemental mage archetype with a couple notable exceptions. First are their prophecy skills, which absorb attacks of one element to counter with their own. Good for stopping moves that might otherwise devastate the party. The other is their Dark Ether skill, which allows one row of party members to use skills at no cost. This turns the Zodiac into a battery that lasts as long as they have TP. My favorite line of variants consists of Mareep, Flaffy, and Ampharos. This is my favorite line in all of Pokemon, so I'm definitely biased, more so that its Etrian variant has a teal shiny. It's based on the Somnivore and Dream Smasher FOEs from EO3 and 4. The former tries to sleep or confuse the party, the latter tries to petrify them. The Dream Smasher is also the source of precious formaldehyde, the item used to get any drop, regardless if it's a conditional or not. Blossom is based on the Botanist class from EO5. It is a standard healer like the Medic, but it can specialize into that role or into inflicting ailments like blind or poison. Sunkern and Sunflora are based on the Sunflower enemy from EO2U and Nexus. It has a fire-type solar beam, and that's about all you need to know. The Ninja class is represented by Sneasel and Weavile. You could argue they're a kind of summoner class, as they conjure clones of themselves that you can control which fill up party slots. They are somewhat evasive and know some ailment skills, but their most notable ability is Drawing Slice, which deals damage based on the number of clones it consumes. This is the skill that can obliterate the Abyssal God with a little setup. Corsola and the Pokemon Odyssey original Reef Sola are based on the Rock Coral enemy from EO3. They can bind arms, but that's about it. Mantine is based on Koro Triangle, Stratum boss of the Azure Rainforest and Guardian of the Forest Folk. It's also encountered as a sea exploration boss in EO3. This ice-themed manta ray tries to debilitate the party with binds and debuffs before going all in with AoE attacks that can inflict sleep. Stantler is the representative of one of the most well-known FOEs, the Fury Horn. Appearing in all games but 5, this deadly deer attempts to inflict confusion on the entire party, letting them wipe themselves out while it stampedes over their faces. It's an early game enemy, however, meaning it won't be long before an experienced party can bring them down. Celebi is the first legendary in the National Dex to have an Etrian variant. They are based on the Arcanist class and the character Wufan from EO4. Arcanists place down circles to hinder the enemy with ailments or binds, and can either gain benefits from their presence such as health regeneration or dispel the circles for various effects. Wufan is a plot-relevant Arcanist who can become a party member after defeating the Stratum boss of the Misty Ravine. Moving on to Hoenn, Poochyena and Mightyena become the Fenrir from EO1, the Untold games, and Nexus. In particular, it's using the 3DS model, as the original looks like a saber-toothed tiger. As the first boss of EO1, it summons a pack of FOEs to overwhelm the party. If you can manage them without too many joining into the fray, it's not a terribly difficult battle. The Wurmple line will be interesting to see how they make its variants, as Beautifly and Dustox are from different enemies entirely. Beautifly is based on the Hellfly from EO1 and the Untold games. It's a post-game enemy that tries to curse party members. Dustox is based on the Big Moth from EO2, 4, and Nexus. Depending on the game, they try to inflict different ailments. Ralts, Kirlia, and Gardevoir are based on the Sovereign class, while Gallade is based on Kujira, who represents the Shogun class. These were both introduced in Etrian Odyssey 3. The Sovereign is a support class who buffs the party and can provide indirect methods of healing. The Shogun dual-wields katanas and can deal decent damage while also commanding their allies for coordinated attacks. The Trip Mushroom is what Shroomish and Breloom take their colors from, although there are many mushroom enemies in EO3 and 4. These fungi use spores to try and confuse the party, while the other types use different ailments and vary between using them as attacks or on death effects. I already liked the Aeron line when I tried Pokemon Ruby, but Pokemon Odyssey made them a mainstay during my first playthrough. Aeron, Lairon, and Aggron base their variant on the Hoplite from EO3, a tank that is at its strongest defending allies on the same row, but can protect either. They fight with spears, meaning they don't lose out on damage if they're protecting from the back line. Also from EO3 is the Monk class, embodied by Meditite and Medicham. The monk is a more traditional healer, but they are also capable of fighting with clubs or their bare hands. But let's be real, if you're running this class it's because you want to use TP to revive instead of items. Subclassing them with Sovereign or vice versa made for a solid healer overall. Volbeat and Illumise are based on two classes with similar traits, Troubadour for Volbeat and Dancer for Illumise. I don't know how to pronounce them. The Troubadour from EO1 and EO2 serve as a support class through their songs. Most of them are buffs for the party, but one of their most notable skills is Erasure, a song to remove enemy buffs. This was a key ability to have against certain super bosses. Dancer is essentially the Troubadour of EO4, though capable of a little more offense through dances granting counterattacks, chase attacks, and the like. They could be considered a little weaker as their dances affected one row of allies at a time as opposed to the whole party, but that could be circumvented with the wide dance ability. I keep thinking Gulpin and Swalot are shaded after the Venom Ooze from EO1, but it's actually the Towering Ooze from the remake EOU. Both are capable of inflicting poison, so you could understand the confusion. The shiny green and orange variant is based on the Sleeper Ooze, which, as its name suggests, tries to inflict sleep. Wailord is based on Kidos, Stratum Boss of the Undersea Grotto from EO3. This telepathic whale serves as the protector of the Deep City and bars you from entry unless you can defeat them. Kidos employs sleep, paralysis, and leg binds to try and stop your party from evading its attacks. In fact, its move Ocean Rave is designed to deal more damage to those affected by ailments. Kidos also buffs its evasion, making itself harder to hit while you're stuck in place. The best counter is to bind the whale's theoretical legs as well, circumventing evasion entirely. The wicked catfish Narmer is represented by Barboach and Whiscash. Also hailing from EO3, Narmer is the first Stratum boss, guarding the exit of Waterfall Woods. They are technically a boss with two phases, as once its HP is low enough it'll run away. Because the boss room is filled with mud that slows the party down, you have to sneak up behind them using one of the hidden paths nearby. In combat, its main gimmick is hiding within mud puddles to leap out and damage the party a turn or two later, and only hitting the correct one will flush Narmer out and cancel their attack. Any AoE attacks make this pattern simple to overcome. Etrian, Baltoy, and Claydol borrow the type-swapping mechanic from the Cradle Guardian, Stratum boss of the Echoing Library in EO4. The boss rotates which mask it's wearing to change its weakness and resistance, then employs elemental attacks based on that mask. Looking at the attacks it has on the wiki, it actually has access to the 6 main damage types in Etrian Odyssey: Cut, Pierce, Bash, Fire, Ice, and Volt. Oh, and it can also paralyze and inflict Headbind, which is a problem for the spellcasters trying to hit its weakness. Duskull, Dusclops, and Dusk Noir are based on one of my favorite classes in Etrian Odyssey 5, the Necromancer. These Dark Summoners conjure wraiths to do their bidding, filling up to 3 of the party's designated summon slots. Wraiths can be used to take hits for the party, but by far their greatest use is sacrificing them to wreak havoc on the enemy. From poisons to curses to explosions, the monsters of Yggdrasil shall know the meaning of fear. Their specializations focus on either a wider assortment of ailments to inflict or creating high HP wraiths to sacrifice, dealing damage based on said high HP. My other favorite class in EO5 is the Harbinger, and who better to embrace the prophet of catastrophe than the disaster Pokemon themselves, Abyssal. Harbingers shroud themselves in miasma armor to enhance their skills. For example, an attack which strikes an enemy row may now have a chance to inflict poison. They can also enshroud their enemies in miasma, debilitating them with effects such as reducing ailment resistance. They could specialize in either enhancing themselves and increasing their repertoire of afflictions, or focus on weakening their enemies further. Relicanth is based on the Sea Wanderer enemy from EO3. These FOEs of the Undersea Grotto travel in schools, circling around select areas of the region. They aren't too threatening alone, employing sleep and curse moves, but since they can bunch up, you may end up battling a few at once. Also, these are the creatures Olympia uses to pick off explorers who delve too deep, tricking people into wandering near their nests. Alright, we only have a few left, so I'm gonna go slightly out of order to keep the final 4 as a group. Okay? Okay. Miss Magius is based on the Hexer from EO 1 and 2 and uses the design of the character Tloctga. These bell-ringing explorers inflict most binds and ailments on enemies, including the 3 kinds of binds. They can also weaken enemy stats and even command them to hurt each other or themselves, but only if they're afflicted by fear. However, they are a pretty underwhelming class in EO1. EO2 is where they shined and even became one of the best damage dealers thanks to a skill called Revenge, which dealt damage based on missing HP. So, you stack max HP boosting equipment, have them run on some damage tiles for a bit until they're down to 1, then blast your problems away. We're down to the Reggies. First off is Etrian Regirock, who is comprised of the same creatures as the Amalgolem in EO5. These tiny clay golems band together to form the stratum boss of the tutelary forest, fueling a barrier to bar passage into the higher levels. The main danger comes from the other small golems coming to reinforce the boss, as it often explodes and leaves individual members vulnerable. Regice, particularly its shiny, refers to the Hollow Queen from EO4. This ghostly ruler is the stratum boss of the Misty Ravine and summons hollow minions to her aid. She provides support with buffs and ailment cleansing, but has a few attacks of her own. The Hollows are a race at war with the Vessels, aka the Arcanists, and our party is sent in to rescue someone the Hollow Queen kidnapped. Once we do, our guild is permitted to create characters of the Arcanist class. Registeel is based on the Golem from the first 3 games. This super boss is largely a physical attacker with some defense buffs, health regen, and the ability to revive itself once with around half HP. One of its more notable traits is that it is a boss that is susceptible to instant death, and in fact, some of its conditional drops require you to defeat it that way. Its role varies from game to game, such as a guardian to the post-game stratum in EO2. Finally, Regigigas embodies the Heavenbringer, final boss of Etrian Odyssey 4. Much like the Primeval, Heavenbringer is a core of Yggdrasil that was corrupted by all the toxins it absorbed in an effort to purify the land. This is a creature that is attempting to return pollution to the land going against its purpose, thus the party must destroy it. The boss consists of 4 parts, including its arms that can regenerate, and the boss's essence, which is exposed when the main body is temporarily destroyed. Okay, we're done. How long was that section? A third of the script? What do you mean there's gonna be more in the sequel? Thank you all for listening to me yap and ramble about a fan game for a niche video game series. Man, I didn't even get to talk about the music. Seriously, go check out the remixes for the game, even the ones that aren't from Etrian Odyssey. And while you're at it, check out the originals by Yuzo Koshiro. If this video convinced you to try either Etrian Odyssey or Pokemon Odyssey, or if I made a mistake since there was a lot to go over, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you, Atlas, for creating a series that's become one of my absolute favorites in the last few years. And thank you to the Pokemon Odyssey team for crafting such an incredible experience. I know I made a couple jabs there, but I literally would not have made this video if I didn't admire the passion you put into this ROM hack. I even went out of my way to play the game all the way through a second time just to record footage, and had to learn how video editing software works just to put this together. That's how inspiring this project was to me. I mean, I wrote the first draft of this script back in September of 2025. Now, this is the part where more established YouTubers would thank their patrons and sponsors and whatnot, but since I'm new to this whole thing, I don't have any of that. I am honestly not sure if I'm gonna do much with this channel. Scripted videos are a lot of work, I've learned, and while I've learned many things in my efforts, it's not exactly my cup of tea. I write as a hobby aside from playing a lot of games, and I originally planned to keep the 2 separate, but maybe I don't necessarily have to. I've also considered the idea of streaming, but I'd really have to think if that's for me. Anyway, that's besides the point. Thank you for hearing me out, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Kabuto and Kabutops embody a similarly deadly creature that goes by Nemi. Oh my goodness, why did I write it that way? Where's my water? This is tough. How do people do this regularly?